I'm Brittany Broben, London Olympics silver medalist in the 10m platform, and I'm here with the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I trust you've had a great week and also hope that you enjoyed last week's episode featuring marathon sensation John Shaw, who at the age of 59 laced up his running shoes and went from being overweight by 20 to 30 kilos to running 5Ks through to setting just a few years later the single age world record at 63 years of age for the marathon in a startling 2 hours 45 minutes. What a remarkable story that was. If you missed it, jump back across, listeners, and you'll enjoy an insight into an athlete that really is just so inspiring in terms of what's possible for us all. Massive thank you to you, the listeners, who make this show possible. Particularly thankful every week for the listeners who jump over to iTunes and leave reviews. The reviews really just help the show get more visible in iTunes and essentially get in the earbuds of more performers who, just like yourselves and myself, are looking to perform at our physical best. Big thank you this week to Soph Running Walks. Sophie rated the show as 5 stars and her comments were, "The podcast is incredible. Brad's able to draw the best out of some of Australia's best athletes. He's able to keep everyone's insights into how humble and hard they are and how hard they've worked. Have listened to and enjoyed every podcast thus far and hang out for each episode. Thanks, Brad. Keep up the awesome work." Soph, really appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Big thank you also to Kay Lyons. Great podcast, 5 stars. I've listened to every episode of my long runs. Kai Hurst episode is my favourite yet. Keep up the great work. Kay, thanks very much for taking the time to leave a review. And I agree, Kai Hurst's episode was an absolute cracker. What an athlete, hey, Kay, to have a professional career in 3 sports. So listeners, if you miss Kai Hurst, Australian sporting icon, jump back and you'll enjoy that episode, I'm sure. If you'd like to leave a review, listeners, it's as simple as jumping over to iTunes, clicking the ratings and review tab and rating away. 1 star if you think it's okay, 5 stars if you think it's great. A review would really be appreciated. So thanks in advance, guys. This week's guest is young Brittany Broben. Brittany Broben shares what is a quite moving story of her rapid rise in the world of professional diving, which culminated at the tender age of just 16 in the silver medal at the London Olympic Games. From there, Britt set out on her next Olympic campaign, which would have been 2016 Rio Olympic Games. Unfortunately, at the trials, Britt suffered a serious shoulder injury, which absolutely cruelled her intention to go on to Rio and hopefully better her silver medal performance from the previous Olympic Games. This is a really insightful episode in the sense that it's one of the most poignant reminders of just how cruel and tough sporting ambitions and in the pursuit of our physical best can be at times. So Brittany really lets us into her world, what it's been like since she has had to stop her diving career and diving aspirations, and Britt's transitioning and doing remarkably well for a young lady. So if you enjoy this episode, get behind the program and let Britt know you've listened to it and thank her for being so transparent. I was really thankful for some of the insights she shared. So I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. It's brought to you, as always, by POGO Physio, the physios that help you perform at your physical best through our industry first fixed fee, unlimited access to 6 12-week finish line physio programs. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au and check it out. Guys, let's not jump in this week. Sorry the dad joke, but let's dive right in with Britt Broben. So listeners, I'm joined today by Brittany Broben, incredible young Australian athlete. Britt, I've been looking forward to catching up with you really since this show was birthed in 2016 to hear about your story. So welcome along. Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Britt, question. What's one thing that scares Brittany Broben?
10-meter platforms. No. What scares me? That's a good question. I think a lot of things scare me. But I don't know. I can't pinpoint one thing. I was always like a pretty crazy kid, so nothing really got to me when I was younger. But when I grew up, and I am growing up still, but when I got a bit older, I think I realised like jumping off 10-meter platforms is actually scarier than it used to be. So I did get a lot of fear the last 3 years probably of actually diving.
We've got to go there, Britt. Can we park it and come back to that, because that's absolutely fascinating. And for listeners, the context being that obviously Britt picked up that silver medal in London 2012 as a 16-year-old, and sitting here today, you are now 20 years of age?
I just turned 21.
When was your birthday?
Weeks ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
Was there a party?
There was a party.
What did the party involve?
It was a fun party.
So it was a good 21st. You saw in the occasion appropriately.
Yes.
So right, we'll come back to that because that's fascinating. Britt, let's talk about your beginnings in diving. You grew up on the Gold Coast.
Yes.
Take us through what your youth was like as young Brittany Broben.
Well, I was born on the Gold Coast. My mum put me in gymnastics when I was 4 because I, unlike my sister, was too energetic for mum to deal with at home all the time. So she put me in gymnastics when I was 4. I did that. I actually did pretty well. I won my first gymnastics medal or trophy, I suppose, when I was about 5, and I was going up against 10 and 12-year-olds. So I was pretty stoked with that performance. And I did gymnastics till I was about I think it was about 10, and I actually got offered to do elite gymnastics up in Brisbane, but my mum and dad were like, no, we can't drive you every day up there, like it's too hard, you're too young, like we just can't do that. And little did they know, a year later I got offered an elite diving program, and then they started doing the driving anyway. So but no, I stopped gymnastics when I was about 10 due to an injury of my foot. And my dad is a photographer, and he was taking photos of Chantel Newbury, who won gold in Athens 2004. And he was at a photo shoot with her one day, and she mentioned that they were starting a new talent identification program for young gymnasts, young trampolinists who they tried to recruit, I suppose, to diving. And my dad's like, oh, I've got a little gymnast at home on the couch, maybe I'll bring her along. And she's like, yeah, bring her along, we'll see how she goes. And I think it started out, and this is trialing for an elite program, but for young kids that they were going to bring up. And so I went along, and I think that was out of 50 kids, it got cut to 30, and then I got cut to 20, and then I got cut to 8, and I kept making it through. So that's kind of where I started. I did my first diving competition when I was 12, and then 4 years later I made my first Olympics. So I went pretty quickly through the ranks of diving, which caused a little bit of upset with a few people, as you can imagine. But I'm the first, I suppose, kid of that talent identification program to have made it big internationally. So I take that in my stride, and I'm very proud of that. But so I came up in the ranks really quickly in the diving world.
So Britt, you were 10 years of age.
looking at gymnastics, the trip to Brisbane was a disincentive for your parents.
Yeah.
You had little more than a year or whatever it was on. The opportunity came up to be part of this dive-in program, and Rob and Chantel wasn't Rob as a husband and wife, wasn't it? They were obviously. Were you aware? Australian divers of great success. Were you aware of their success prior to this sort of chance encounter with your father? Was diving even on the radar of what a young Brittany Broben? Or was it gymnastics as a sole sort of interest and focus?
I think I don't remember, but I don't ever remember looking at diving being like, oh my gosh, that's my sport. I don't know, I was just gymnastics. I was just always a gymnast in my head. Like, I'm a gymnast. And then I think I did trial a couple of days at the Southport pool, but I think that was because I was about to trial for this TID program. So they were like, maybe you should just go test it out first before you throw yourself in. And I remember like going there and I'm like, so what levels are there in diving? And they looked at me like, it's not gymnastics, Brittany, there's no levels. Like, and I'm like, what is this sport? Like, who does this sport? So it was a little bit of a, like, I suppose, fate encounter that my dad was there, but every time he would like say, oh, driving to Brisbane's tough, like it's so hard for your mum to, I'd say, Dad, you created this situation. So
you had good leverage.
Yeah.
So Britt, what was that first testing out session at Southport Pool like? What did you get up there and, I mean, it's got the 5 metre platform, correct? What did you get up there and what did you do?
I actually remember I was on the 3 metre springboard, just doing like rolling off into the water. It was like called like a peanut roll, so you just literally roll off. And I remember one of the kids looking at me and saying, if you do it well, they make you go to the 5 metre. So I remember just doing it really bad because I was just too scared. I remember that. But yeah, nothing real. I did a lot of straight jumps for a very long time, so nothing exciting.
And when you say straight jumps, you mean like basics
like
or stuff?
Like a pin drop.
Foundational stuff.
Yeah.
Which I guess is such a key element of the fancy stuff that we would see. And Britt, so you're 12 years of age, you're starting, how many times a week would you commute up to Brisbane?
At the beginning, it started, I think, with 3 or 4 days a week, but it was morning and night. But then it very quickly got to 6 days a week. But
how quickly, Britt? How quickly?
I think it was at least 6 months. They're like, oh, it's easy, just 3 days. And then it was like, boom, 6 days. But there was a couple of other kids at the start that lived on the Gold Coast as well. So we did kind of like a carpool. Yep. So, that was all right. But, yeah, I don't really remember the 3-day-a-week trainings. I've always known 6 days a week of training, so...
And so this is through your school years.
Yeah.
You would get up at what time would your alarm ring to get up to?
I remember when I first started commuting to Brisbane, one of the other girls lived out at Mudgeeraba, so my mum would drop me out to Mudgeeraba and then I would go up from there. So my alarm would go off at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd go up there, we'd train 6 till 8, and then they'd drive me back to primary school because I was still in primary school. So they'd drive me back home to primary school. I'd leave school at about 1:30 to get back up there at 2:30.
1:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I would train, I think, from 3 till 6. When I was, when I first started, it was just 3-hour afternoon session. And then when you get a bit older, it's like 3.5 hours. So, yeah. So
that was a typical day. You would have 5 hours plus or minus of training a day, 6 days a week.
It was a bit different on weekends. We only trained once on Saturday, so it was just a 3-hour session on Saturday.
But so more or less 25 to 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
Plus school load alongside. How did you practically get your schoolwork done when you were, leaving after lunch? Were you just always catching up?
Sometimes I sit back now and I don't even know.
Yeah.
I can't even remember like having time to study. I was just winging it through school. I probably shouldn't say that.
So hello all your teachers.
Yeah. My teachers are very good to me. Very, very good and helpful teachers.
And so Britt, at what point did you realise that you had a real gift with diving, to the point that you could, in 4 years, in under 4 years, really go from, pin drop off the Southport pool to silver medal at the London Olympic Games. Like, when did the penny drop for you that, wow, I've really got a gift?
I think it was in 2010. At the Open Championships, I came third on platform, and that was my first year competing platform. And I came third at the Nationals, and I stuffed a couple of dives up. So I think I was 14 then, and I think that was the time when everyone was like, "Whoa, I think she's got something." But my coach said he saw something like in me when I was like 13, 14. I was a very quick learner. I learnt very quickly. I had a very, when I got taught something, it would just take me a couple of times and then I would get it. So that helped me a lot. But yeah, probably 2010. And then that was the year of the Commonwealth Games and I was 14 and I had a good shot of making that and I just bombed out and it was just heartbreaking for me, but I was 14. So the pressure kind of got to me. But then I did make...
when you say bombed out, as in you didn't execute?
Yeah, I didn't do very well. The pressure got to me. If I dived like I was in training, I should have made it. But yeah, the pressure got to me in that. But then the day after, we had our junior national trials, and I killed that. I did really well.
The day after?
Yeah, day after.
What do you think was the difference, Britt? It was only a day later.
I think because I was one of the top juniors at the time, so I've had a little bit more confidence going into that, knowing that. But I made the Junior Worlds team that year, and that was pretty special to me. And then I went and got silver at the Junior Worlds, so that was it was a good ending to a little bit of an upset. But yeah, I was only 14. So
you were 14, and so you sort of at that age realised that you had capacity to compete at the highest level on the international stage, and you just shared, the pressure for the Commonwealth Games selection, but yet the next day, the flick was switched and it was a different mindset. Britt, what would you just define as the quintessential element that divers at an Olympic level that podium have that divers that don't podium don't have?
That's a good question. I think it doesn't matter if you get on the podium. I think there are different athletes regardless. But I think that I really truly believe in the amount of work that you put in will get you somewhere, and if you don't put in the work, it won't get you there. So you can have the most talent in the world, but if you don't put in the effort, I believe that's what gets you there. Like I trained my heart out every day. I pushed myself. Like my coach knew I was the type of athlete that I would be sick in bed at home and I would be crying to mum because she wouldn't drive me to training. Like I would go to training regardless. I think that's one of the things that got me there, and I think that's one of the things that my coach saw in me very early on, that I didn't back down. If I was scared of something, if I didn't want to do something, I'd do it first thing when I got to training so I could get it over and done with. I wasn't the type of athlete that backed down from a challenge, I suppose. Even if I was petrified to do a new dive, I would always want to do it. So
can you give listeners an example, Britt? So an example of where, as you said, you were petrified of doing it, but you got to training and just went straight in. Give me an example.
I suppose this isn't being petrified, this story, but this goes to show how tough my coach was, I suppose, and how tough I was. So when I think I was 13 or 14, and my coach, I had Chinese coaches and very strict coaches, and on Saturdays we had really difficult strength days. And
as in the gym, Britt?
In the gym, but not like weights. Yeah. It was more like gymnastics, strength, like a lot of abs, a lot of running, like stair jumping. Yeah. And I remember having a really bad migraine one day, and I was hurting. I was like, I told my coach, and he thought that I was just trying to get out of it, and I'm like, I'm not, I swear, I've got a really bad headache. And he's like, no, just keep going. Anyway, I ended up vomiting. I was like, that's how bad I was, like vomiting all the way through I tried to run outside and I got to the trampoline, next to the trampoline, and I just vomited my guts up. And he looked at me and he was like, And then instead of helping me and saying, that's all right, he made me go to the Lost and Found, get something, clean it up myself, and then continue training. So that was the type of kid I was, and I just do it. I just did it, and I just pushed through, and yeah.
Where do you think that level of, as you say, toughness, pushing through it, being upset when you couldn't get to training because you were ill, or where did that come from? Where did that drive, that determination come from, Britt?
I think I had a lot of respect and love for my coach, and I didn't ever want him to think that I didn't want it, or I didn't... I suppose I didn't want to ever let him down. Like, he put a lot of effort into me, so I wanted to put a lot of effort into him, I suppose. Yep. So I was just always the kid that used to really get upset when, like, kids would, like, cheat on their numbers or skip or just, like, not come to training and stuff like that. But I never wanted to be known as that kid, because I suppose you get to the Olympics and you get to that last minute and you think to yourself, did I give everything? Did I do everything I could? And I never wanted to get to London or to a big competition and think, I could have done more. So I suppose that was always why I did that.
And it's interesting, Britt, the first question I open up the athlete interviews with is, the thing that scares you the most. You were the 10-metre platform as you mature in years on the clock. But so many athletes will say, a variation of what you just said, that it's that fear of not performing at your best or giving your very best on a given day. Mm-hmm. I was smiling as you were sharing that, because I'm thinking the irony is that, you were winging it at school. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Were you like that? Did you have the same standards for yourself, in other areas of your world that you obviously had for your diving and your approach to your sport?
I've always been a pretty tough kid. I've always been put a lot of pressure and expectation on myself. So I suppose I did put a lot more effort into my sport than I did into my school, only because I would get to school and then all I would be thinking about is, oh my gosh, what I have to do at training in the afternoon. But I've always been the type of person that, like, never wants to back down, I suppose, from a challenge. I always want to try and see how far, I suppose, I can go and how far I can push my body. Yeah,
great. And we'll talk before we wrap this today about your new venture and your entry into a new sport. Britt, what would you rate as your greatest achievement through your diving years? And for listeners, when I refer to Britt's diving years, and we'll cover this today, Britt made a public announcement this year that with the Rio Games and a shoulder injury that Britt was drawing the curtain on the diving career, and we'll go there. But so when I talk about the diving years, from that kid that started doing the pin drops through to obviously Olympic success, what would you rate as your greatest achievement?
2011, I went to my first open international competitions in Fort Lauderdale, and the Olympic champion from 2008, who also won London, Chen Rillian, she was there as well, and I was 15, and I just blitzed the whole competition, the highest score to date that I've ever done. I scored 366 at the Olympics. I scored 400 in Fort Lauderdale that year. I won the best dive, the highest score, and then the whole platform competition. So that was probably my biggest achievement.
And you beat the 2008 Beijing 10-metre champion.
I was getting the eyes from a coach after, like, who are you?
And was that a Chinese diver?
Yeah, Chen Rillian, yeah.
Is it quite intimidating being an Aussie girl from the Gold Coast? I mean, from an outsider in, obviously you were training with a Chinese coach, and so from an outside in, it looks like they are very intense and focused. Is it quite intimidating, or you get to know the athletes and realise that the perceptions?
It is intimidating, but I suppose after that I struggled a lot from that win. The next month I went to Shanghai. I made the World Championship team. Didn't even make a final. Didn't even score 300 points. Like I bombed out completely. I struggled a lot after that with just the pressure. And then at the end of the year was our World Cup trials for London. So World Cup before the Olympics is the test event. and they said if you don't make the World Cup team, you generally won't make the Olympic team. So that was a lot of pressure on me. And then I missed the World Cup team that year. I just couldn't find my groove, I suppose, again after that big win. Like I just kept mucking up.
Was it the expectations that you had on yourself to reproduce that?
Yeah, and I was getting a bit older. I was turning 16. Like I was getting a bit taller. I was like changing, and then that put a lot of pressure. And I suppose Mum and I like sat down and with the diving people, and they're like, "Oh, what's next?" And they're like, "She's got Olympic trials. That's it. It's you either make it or you don't. There's nothing else." Like, and I missed that World Cup team, so at the Olympic trials, that was it. Top 2 go. There's no changing that.
And to be clear, nothing else. You mean that would be the end of your?
That would be the end of the season.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Once the Olympics are over, you just start again. You build back up for the next 4 years. So, went to the Olympic trials. Preliminary round was 70 points behind first. And I was like standing there, and I remember sitting next to Mum. She's like, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, "Nah." Like 70 points behind in a diving competition is a whole dive. Like that's a big thing. And I remember standing there like, "What are you doing, Britt? Like you've trained for 4 years. Like you've done so many things. You're gonna let a little bit of nerves get to you." So then in the semi-final, I ended up winning it, and I ended up gaining my points back. And then in the final, I ended up coming second by 0.65. So I just made, and I think between first to fourth, there was like 4 points. And I'm talking 4 points out of like 900 points.
Wow.
So it was extremely close. But that was probably the toughest competition I've ever done. Even when I was in the Olympic final, my coach looked at me and he's like, "I was more nervous at the trials than I am now." So
wow.
Yeah.
So let's go to London 2012.
Yeah.
You've made your Olympic team.
Yeah.
Could you, as a girl, have ever imagined that at 16 years of age, like when you were starting out in the sport?
No.
Truly, in your heart of hearts?
No. I always told people, "Yeah, I'm training for the Olympics." Yeah, but deep down, like I never thought I would make it.
And so, what was going through your head the moment you knew you were in the Olympic team?
I remember at the trials you had to come in top 2, but then you had to go overseas. We had to go to Canada and America, and you had to score a certain amount of points over there to get it. So we all were so excited when I came in the top 2, and then I went overseas and I got the score in the first competition I did, and I was just like, oh my gosh, and my coach was so proud of me. It was me and him for a long time, just the two of us. Like he pretty much took me under his wing, and if it wasn't for him, I don't think I could have done it.
And so how did London play out for you? I mean, the Australian sporting community and listeners most likely know Brittany came home at 16 with the silver medal in the 10m platform.
Yeah.
Give us a little insight into London. How did you?
Everything was just like a big whirlwind. Like I couldn't believe it. Like I mean, it's pretty tough when you're 16. You have to hold a handstand in front of 13,000 people watching you. It was one of the competitions in my whole career that I truly enjoyed every minute of. And I think a part of me enjoyed every minute because I told myself this happens once every 4 years. Like if you may never get this opportunity again, I suppose. And to see my whole family in the stands, my mum, my sister had my face on their t-shirts, and they were so excited. And I think that I really, really trained my butt off to get there. So I think everything paid off when I got there. And I was fourth in the prelim, I was third in the semi, and then I was second in the final. So I had one more round. but it was a big shock for me to be up there in all 3 rounds. That was very my coach he acts like he was calm, but I could tell that he was freaking out. Especially when I landed my 4th dive on my stomach in the final. I did it really bad, and I came out of the water and I was like, you just trained for 4 years and you just messed it up with 1 dive to go. And then I was in 4th place going into the final dive. I was in 4th place, and Yeah.
So on that final dive, Britt, what's going through your head as you stood at the top?
I remember thinking to myself, I actually remember like wobbling a bit, and I was like, this opportunity may never happen again. Like you're in the prime position, like for this opportunity, and I think I just went for it. I did everything I could. I remember doing that dive in the warm up and doing it really badly, and I went over to my coach and I said, do you want me to do it again? Like, I'll do it. He's like, nah, you'll be fine. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, do you want me to do it again? And then sure enough, I like pulled it together, and I remember telling myself in my head, like, this comes around once every 4 years. You may never get this opportunity again, and if you don't want to go home with a 4th place and think you could almost grab it and you let it go. So
that was the last sort of thought, right? Let's capitalise on the moment.
Yeah, and then I hit the water and I was like, yeah.
And you knew? You would know at that moment?
I knew at that moment it was probably going to be bronze at least. I'm really glad it's silver, because I would have been kicking myself if it was bronze, because it would have been really, really close. And I knew that I'd messed up too much to get the gold. So when I saw the scoreboard come up, I was just like, it was the biggest relief in the world. Like, the relief of like, you train your whole life for that one moment, and to like have it actually work out for you, the relief was just like, oh, now I can relax. So
beautiful, Britt. And what was the dive? Explain to listeners the actual dive you did for that last.
It's called 5. Oh my god, now I haven't been diving for like 2 months. I forgot what it's called. 5-2-5-3. Diving is all in numbers. So it's a back 2.5 somersaults with 1.5 twist.
Wow.
Yeah.
And for how many years or how many times would have you executed that dive in training?
I learned that dive when I was 14. So I probably would have done it like at least 15 to 20 times a week. Yeah. And that's like, doesn't sound like a lot, but for a 10-meter dive, for one 10-meter dive, that's a lot. But yeah, I would have done it a million times. I would have stuffed it up more times than I did with it though.
Well, that's so interesting, Britt. I just last week actually sat in a presentation given by Andy Walsh, the high performance director of Red Bull, and speaking about the athletes with Red Bull, and that we all see as the public the sexy stuff, Robbie Madison jumping up onto the pretend Eiffel Tower in Vegas. But what we don't see is some of the footage that he showed of Robbie jumping up, on scaffold in 1 week, the next week it's a bit higher, and doing that jump countless times before we see it. And so it's just something that fascinates me. Britt, let's change slight gears. Before we talk about where you're at now and what's happened this year, can we just jump into a bit of performance stuff, just on the insights into performance? I call this the performance round. Think of it like 8 to 10 quick questions with a sort of rapid response.
Okay.
Sometimes we deviate. What was the training session you most disliked through your diving years?
Oh my gosh, these are supposed to be quick, and I'm like...
No, that's okay.
Probably Monday trainings, only because I would finish a big week. We didn't go in the pool on a Saturday. It was just pure strength day. So then we'd have like 2 days out of the water, and we'd get back on Monday. And I'd have had those 2 days like out of the pool, and you get back and you have a big 10-meter session on Monday, and you're just like, no.
Straight into it.
Yeah, so probably Mondays.
What about your most loved training session, Britt?
I want to say Saturdays when we weren't in the pool.
That was your rest day. It can be that. Rest is training, right? Rest is training. Britt, favourite, what did you eat? So the night before, what did you eat before your London final?
Okay, here's the thing. Back then, 16-year-old Brittany didn't really think about what she ate. So I probably had a bit of pasta. Probably followed. I remember in London we had the yogurt, like the healthy yogurt for dessert, and then we'd crush biscuits up into it. So I don't even know. I would have just ate whatever I felt like. I would have walked through the food court and been like, yeah, that's for tonight.
So who knows?
Who knows?
Britt,
but I will say that I always had a banana before my competition. My mum gave me a banana before my final of the Olympic trials, and from then on it was the lucky banana before every competition. If I didn't have the lucky banana, downhill.
Well, how long before you started diving would you ingest the banana? Talking hours or?
No, we're talking like 15 minutes before the comp starts.
So it really was a special banana.
It was.
Good on you, Mrs. Broben. It worked.
Yeah.
Bedtime, because you were getting up at 4 a.m. as a growing teenager.
Mm-hmm.
What time were you hitting the pillow overnight?
Probably about 8:39. I'd like to say it was after my homework, but I never did homework.
Because you were just winging it through school, right?
Yeah.
Britt, who's the athlete you most admire and why?
The athlete I most admire. Ooh, that's a tough one. The athlete I'd have to say Matthew Mitchum, if it's in the diving world, because I did train with him for about 6 months after when I moved to Sydney last year, and he's just a normal guy. He gets scared of dives. He's open about being scared of them. Like, you can talk to him about anything, and he generally, like, he won in Beijing, and like he knew the struggles of trying to get back to the top and how hard it is to get to the top, but how like it's even harder to stay there, and he really understood that, and he just, I think, really gets it. But I suppose in the diving sense, that's who I really look up to.
Yeah, beautiful. Toughest competitor you ever competed against, Britt?
Megan Benfito from Canada. She, like, I answered that one straight away, didn't I? She is a very, very confident, tough competitor in the sense that she is very consistent. I don't think she's the best in the world, but I think she's one of the most consistent. But it was more so that she just had that attitude that she's like, yeah, I'm good. So.
And would that be a little bit off-putting?
Yeah, I suppose off-putting when I was younger, and I was a little bit scared of her, but she went on to win bronze in London. Yep. I mean, not in London, in Rio.
Yep.
So I think that she's a pretty tough competitor. But I mean, I had lots of tough competitors.
Everyone on the platform. Was there a mantra you used to use consistently when you'd be up there about to execute a dive? Obviously, you mentioned, Britt, that in London you were like, right, let's capitalise on this moment.
Yeah.
Comes around every 4 years. But would there be, one saying that you'd be like, that was your go-to rev up?
I wouldn't say it was a saying, but I was a very, very weird diver in the sense that I would blink 12 times before every dive. I had to blink exactly 12 times before every dive. And then there used to be a clock at the end of Chandler Aquatic Centre, and it was a digital clock, and like on certain numbers I couldn't dive.
So where did the blinking come from? Was this just your own creation?
Yeah, it was my own creation, and it was a bad one because I could never break the blinking habit. And then my coach would be like, you've got to go quicker. And I'm like, I've got to blink 12 times before I go. It's as quick as I can go.
And what were the numbers that you wouldn't dive on?
13. What was the other one? Oh, the numbers I would dive on would be 12, 37, 57. People are going to think I'm so weird when I do this, but it was a strain. I think it was because I spent so much time up on that 10 metre by myself at training. I just think of things in my head and then I just run with them, and then
Beautiful. Britt, last two questions in the performance round. Is there a recovery tip you'd recommend for athletes just across the board? I mean, I would look at your level of diving, at the games and in competition, and I'd be like, what are they doing in between dives? Like, what's your best recovery tip?
I was a really bad example of recovery, but as I got older, you really understand how it helps your body. I'd say stretching is a huge one, just because your body isn't a 15-year-old's body forever. When you get older, you get tighter, your muscles change, and also just food. I think I grew up in a sport that is very body conscious, I suppose. I've been in Paris Swimmers since I was 12 years old in front of the world, so sometimes that can really mess your head up a little bit, but it's really important to manage and to have the right food and have that for your energy, for your
Yeah, great. Britt, thanks for sharing around that performance round. Well done. I'd give you the gold medal.
Oh, thanks.
Britt, let's talk about this year.
Yeah.
Can you take listeners through, obviously there's been a shoulder injury that had caused you some challenges after London 2012 Olympic Games. What's transpired this year? Obviously you made an announcement there just prior to the Rio Olympic Games.
Yes.
What's the year been like for you? Take us through the journey.
It's been very, very difficult. I had shoulder surgery in 2014 and I was making my big comeback for Rio, and it took me 2 years to get back. And I think the day that I was back at my peak was the Olympic trials, and then I dislocated my shoulder that day. But this year I went to Germany at the beginning of the year, and I won that German competition, which was really big for me, and I felt like that was going to be the start of this big year. And I trained really hard. I probably pushed myself a little bit too hard because I was dealing with a couple of other things outside of the diving world that really got to me. And then I trained and I pushed myself really hard. And the week before Olympic trials, they thought I had fractured my wrist, and that sent me into a bit of a spiral because I was like, oh my gosh, I've trained for 4 years and now I've fractured my wrist. And I got a scan and it was all clear, which was good, but I couldn't train on it for about a week on my hands because I just couldn't put any pressure on it.
Had you had an accident? Had you actually done something?
It was just a build-up of doing so much 10 metre, more and more 10 metre. And I didn't really think about my shoulder. I kind of put it on the back burner. And once you've had shoulder surgery, you've got to keep up with that or else it'll just deteriorate. But
you mean with the strength conditioning?
Yeah. And so then I got to Olympic trials and my wrist was okay. They cortisoned it, so I couldn't really feel it. And actually a month before the Olympic trials, my back was a bit tight from training, and I did a somersault in the dry land and I tweaked it, and I couldn't move for 6 hours. I was in too much pain, and I remember being at the physio office oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And that was another week off training because I just couldn't move.
This is all leading into Rio Olympic trials.
Yeah, this is all.
So you had the wrist, the back.
Yeah, and then I got to Olympic trials and they'd cortisoned my shoulder because I was feeling a little bit of a niggle, but I thought it was just from the training. I didn't think that it was anything bad because, in my head I thought, I've had the surgery, there's nothing wrong with it now. And
the surgery, for listeners, Britt, that was what, shoulder stabilisation surgery?
Yeah, full reconstruction. So at trials, I just felt my shoulder just didn't feel right. It felt like when I put my arms up, it didn't feel like it was in the right spot. But I didn't think anything of it because I thought, I've had the surgery, they've fixed it, and that was in my head that everything, nothing could be wrong with it. So then my wrist felt better, my back felt better, my shoulder was a little bit niggly, and I went into the prelim round and did really good, was in second. I went into the semi-final round, did really good, was in second, but on my last dive of the semi-final round, on my second last dive, I did a really good dive. I got 9.5, but I felt my shoulder, something happened when I hit the water, and I came out of the water and I looked at my coach and I was like, something's wrong, it doesn't feel right. And he's like, well, do you want to pull out? And I was like, well, no. And then I did my last dive, and when I hit the water I actually came out crying because I was like, something's really wrong. And he was like, oh, don't worry, we'll just ice it, we won't train tomorrow, we have 5 more dives and then we're going to the second Olympics, that's it, you just got to get through them. Because I was in second, quite comfortably in second, and top 2 go.
Was this your same coach that you had for London?
No, different
coach at this stage, yep.
Yeah. And then on the final day, I did a dive off the 5 metre as a warm-up, and I came out of the water and I was like, something's really wrong, I don't know. And he's like, don't worry about it, we won't warm up on 10 metre, we'll just go for it. And I've done that once before, and the once before was when I hurt my shoulder the first time, and my coach, I couldn't warm up on 10 metre, I just had to compete it. So my coach said we'll just go for it. And my first dive off the 10 metre in the final, like 9.5 nines, like really good dive. And then my coach is like, yeah, we've got this, let's do this. There's 5 dives in the round, and it got to my second dive, and this was the dive I've always had a little bit of fear for. Hit the water, my shoulder dislocated, I swam up, it popped back in. I came out of the water I looked over at my coach like almost screaming, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so painful. And something was wrong. I was like, something's wrong. So he's like, and the physio came down, and they're like, no, it's in place. It's fine. It's in place. The next dive I had was a handstand. So I was in the shower room pretty much in like bawling my eyes out, because I felt like someone was like ripping my arm. And I've never felt a dislocation pain before, because my shoulder had only ever stretched. It never dislocated. Yeah. And I remember being in the shower room, and they're like, are you okay? Can you do it? And I remember trying to do a handstand and just collapsing on my head multiple times. Like, I was like, put me up there, I'll do it. Like, please, I've got 3 dives left, and I'm going to be a dual Olympian. Like, please put me up there. And the physio's like, Britt, no, like, you can't, like, it won't end well for you. And I kept like trying to push up to do a handstand, and it kept popping out. Like, I just felt something, and that was really hard. And then it got to my turn, and they called my name, and I remember like sitting in the spa room, and one of my coaches and the physios were there, and I was just like not coping, almost like I was bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I worked 4 years for this, I've been through all this crap, and now like I'm not gonna be able to go, because it was up to the board's discretion then, because I technically didn't finish the final.
Because you had 3 dives left at that point?
3 dives left.
Out of the 5, you've
yes,
done the 2.
but to make the Olympics, it's out of the 15 dives, so it's out of the prelim, semi and final. And at the end, I was actually only 60 points behind second. And I'm talking scores of like 900 and something. So I literally, if I had done one more dive, I still would have been in the top 2 overall. So they took that into consideration. And an average dive is probably about 65, 70 points. And I was only 60 points behind, and I had 3 dives to go. So I was still like, and that was tough. And I remember just crying and being like, I've worked so hard for this, and now this happens to me. Like, it was pretty tough.
And Britt, what was the time between trials and the Olympic Games?
Less than 12 weeks.
Okay.
So we had trials in May, and then June, July. So like 10 weeks or something. Yeah. So then, they took me straight from the pool to get an MRI, because they needed to see what was wrong. And so I went there, and I remember laying in the MRI bed, and this was like half an hour after I did it, and they put the headphones on me, and then they started playing sad music, and I remember crying in the MRI bed, and they're like, excuse me, Brittany, can you please lay still? And I'm like, can you please turn this sad music off? I'm like, I just missed my Olympic dream by like 60 points. Anyway, so then I remember having that done, and I couldn't lift my arm or anything, and it never happened to me before. And I remember when I got back to the hotel, my coach called me down to his room, and like the physio and my coaches, like, they wouldn't look at me, and I was like, oh, here we go. And then he's like, so there's been a bit of damage, and I'm like, oh no, like that's not good. And he's like, when you said it dislocated, it did. And I straight away knew. I was like, this is gonna need surgery. Like, I knew, because I'd been in the position before. And I was like, I can't do surgery again. Surgery the first time was horrible. It took me so long, and I pushed myself too fast. And so then the surgeon had a look at it, and he said it's inoperable at the moment. So we're just going to try and rehab it really quickly and see if we can get you on the plane to Rio. And I was like, done. Yeah, so let's do that. Like, let's rehab. I'm ready to rehab. And I remember when you dislocate your shoulder, you usually have 6 to 8 weeks in a sling. I had 5 days in a sling. So they put me in a sling for 5 days. I think I lasted about 3 days and was like, I'm ready, let's go back. And then rehab was harder than I thought. I couldn't lift my arm up for 2 weeks. So then it got to 8 weeks before the Olympics. And then I did straight jumps for about 4 weeks of just doing straight jumps. And they strapped my arm all up, like pretty much strapped it to my body for about 4 weeks. And then I started to dive again. And every time I would stand on the edge of the platform, no matter if it was... I remember doing a dive off the side of the pool for the first time after I did, and I was shaking. I was that scared, and I was like, if I'm doing this off the edge of the pool, which is like 30 centimeters, imagine like being up on that 10 meters. So I started doing little dives again, and then off the 3 meter, off the 5 meter, and every time I hit the water, well, not every time, but sometimes I hit the water, I could just feel it moving a bit, and I'd just get major anxiety and like just start crying, and my coach would have to give me the pep talk every time. And it ended up getting about 2 weeks before we had to leave for Rio, and I'd only done 3 out of my 5 dives, and I couldn't rip on the water, and rippers like make no splash because my arms weren't strong enough. Every time I hit the water, it was like there was a splash, and in diving that's not what you want. So I remember like just getting really overwhelmed, and it probably affected me more than I should have let it, because I was already dealing with so much other stuff. Because
were you part of the team at this point, Britt?
Yeah.
You had been discretionally put in?
Yeah, I was part of the team. I passed my fitness test. I did everything. So it got to a week before, and it was on the Wednesday, and we were leaving on the Sunday. I had my plane ticket, had my uniform, had everything. My bag was packed, ready to go. It was the Wednesday night, and I did a warm-up dive on the 5 meter. Before I was supposed to go up to the 10 meter, I hit the water, and my shoulder just moved out of place, and I came out of the water crying. And I remember walking over to my coach like, it's over, it's done, I can't do this, something's really wrong. And he's like, just go to the physio, just relax, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. And I'm like, and I remember laying in the physio just crying to him, and he's like, we're not making any decisions yet, let's see how you wake up. And I was like, I was just laying there crying, because I knew that it was just really bad. Like, I knew I wasn't going to get on the plane. And I remember the next morning, or Thursday morning, I went to training, and I was like teary the whole training session, just because I like knew it was coming to an end. It was getting too close, like I wasn't going to be able to go. And I remember having a meeting with my coach and my strength coach, and yeah, that was a tough meeting. And then that afternoon, I made the decision, like we made the decision that it was just not going to happen. It was, it'd come around too quickly, and I wasn't strong enough, and so I pulled out. I got sent home that day. They sent me home. I remember coming home, and it's pretty hard when you have a going away party, all your family's excited, they're ready to watch you, and then the week later you gotta be like, hey, not going. So I pulled out, and a lot of people had all their different opinions of like, you should have kept going, you should have pushed yourself. And then I got my MRI results back, and they said, you didn't tear your rotator cuff at the Olympic trials. At the Olympic trials, but it's torn now, and you've done a lot more damage. There's more tears. I remember the my sports doctor, Mark Young, calling me and saying, how have you even been diving? Like, what have you been doing? And I'm just like, it's what the Olympics does to you. It makes you a little bit insane. But yeah, it was really bad. And he's like, look, you're going to need surgery if you ever want to do sport again, let alone if you even want to think about diving again. So that was, in a sense, it was, it made me realise that I had made the right decision, because he said if you had done one more dive off that 10 metre, you would have done serious damage. Like, you've done serious damage, but it would have been bad, and you would have I didn't want to get over to Rio and come out of the water screaming in front of the whole world. I already did that in front of Australia at the trials, so yeah.
So Britt, since this decision was made, and you mentioned that was a really hard meeting with the strength coach and your coach, I guess that's the meeting when you called it.
Yeah.
How have you been dealing psychologically? I mean, I talk as a physio about when we treat people, we're not just treating the sore shoulder, we're treating 3 things: the fear of not being able to do the physical things that we love to do, the anxiety that comes with not being able to give your best, perform at your best, and the frustration with not being out there. How you're young in years, you just turned 21. It's the pinnacle of the sport. How are you coping, and what have you been using to to try and get perspective?
I suppose a lot of also like going back to that Rio, I didn't want to have an Olympic silver medal going into my second Olympics as the reigning silver medalist and not be able to give a performance that I probably could have even made it into the second round. Like I didn't want to go out like that. I knew that something was wrong. I couldn't train, and that played a lot on my mind as well. Like I achieved my goal when I was 16 and I wanted to go back there fully fit, fully ready to give it my all, and it was pretty heartbreaking, and coming home and I suppose having to tell people and having to answer questions. I remember the week I came home, I went to Byron Bay by myself for a week just to relax because I just couldn't deal with it. I remember then after that, the week after or so, I had surgery and I was sitting in the surgery bed watching my event, and that was really hard for me.
Wow. So watching where you would have been, the girl that you mentioned as the toughest competitor, medaling, and you knew you could have been in the mix. So it was hard tough. Because I suppose 4 years ago everything was happening for me, everything was falling into place, and then if you'd told me 4 years ago that this would be happening, like this was supposed to be my first Olympics, like I wasn't even supposed to make London, no one thought I'd make London, so I'm very grateful that I did have that experience in London because it made this time a little bit easier. But I struggled a lot, and the last couple of months have been really hard. I have good days, but I do have really, really bad days sometimes, and people don't they see the happy face, they see me smiling, they see me getting through each day, but they don't see the dark days. And I put a lot of time, a lot of effort. I mean, I was training up to 3 times a day leading into Rio, just trying to get my body, just trying to get it to hold on. Like I knew it wasn't going to be good, but And Britt, in bringing this into a close, you've recently mentioned you've just transitioned into a bit of a new sport to channel some of that energy. And so tell listeners what you're up to at the moment.
I have started in a triathlon program. I've always been really intrigued to see if my body can do an endurance sport. I've been given I suppose just the opportunity to give it a go and see where I can go, but it's very early days. I'm really still very much a diver in my eyes. I mean, I've only just started with it, and I'm still trying to deal with the grief of my diving career, so I'm not really too far into it at the moment, but it's definitely exciting, and being still only 21 to see what I can do in the sporting world, because at the end of the day I love sport, and I love You're a competitor. You're a born competitor, and a gifted one, clearly at that. Thank you.
Britt, we like to have guests issue a physical challenge for the week for the listeners. It can be anything. It can be small, it can be big, it can be challenge, it can be easy. What would Britt Broben, silver medalist, 2012 Olympic Games, 10m platform, what would you issue listeners as a physical challenge for the week after this show?
I'd say go to Southport Pool and do a pin drop off the 10m.
Wow, okay. And if you're not on the Gold Coast, find a 10m platform, or be careful.
Actually, I don't think you're allowed to jump off the 10m. I think they deem that too dangerous.
So it's a pin drop off a 10m height.
So I'm going to say off the 7.5 metre at the Southport Pool. That's a challenge.
And so we need evidence of this. So we need to drop that on social media if you dive in. So you need time to film it or jump in. Britt, where can listeners find you if you want to be found on social media?
Probably my Instagram's my most popular one that I use, which is just Brittany Broben. But other than that, that's pretty much... I have Facebook, which is just my name as well, but I'm very much an Instagram girl. So listeners, we'll drop Britt's handles in the show notes, so jump over and check those out. Britt, very last question, I'm sneaking this one in. If you could have dinner with 3 people, living or past,
who would be at that dinner table?
Oh my goodness! Wow. People are going to judge me now for this. Oh wow. I'd have to say Kim Kardashian because I do keep up with the Kardashians. I know a lot of listeners would think, of course, but yes. Kim Kardashian, Michael Phelps, and Simone Biles.
Simone Biles.
Simone Biles is the reigning Olympic gold medalist in pretty much everything in artistic gymnastics.
There we go. So that's a pretty talented table.
Yeah.
Well, Britt, as a young Aussie, as someone that's watched your career, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank
you know, I think thanks for sharing openly today about the highs and the lows, which is the whole premise around this program, is to give people a bit of a snapshot into the fact that we see the success, but there's a lot of stuff in between.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage you. You know, the battles really do develop the character that then allows you to sustain success. And I have no doubt you'll channel your energies and your talents and your gifts into areas and succeed in whatever you put your heart to in the years to come. So, Britt, well done. Thanks for popping along.
No worries.
Be great to have you.
It's been great to be here.
So guys, there you have it. Another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I hope you enjoyed Brittany Broben's insights into her Olympic success, and also the insights into how she is managing to transition from Olympic success to great disappointment with her body, obviously letting her down in the sense of her next Olympic campaign being Rio. So it was a transparent episode, pretty raw for Britt, as you can tell. So I'd really appreciate it if you enjoyed it, to let her know. Reach out on social with her handle as we shared there. If you want to get the show notes, guys, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. You'll find everything there that we've mentioned through the program, plus more. And if you'd like to leave a review, as at the start of the show, jump over to iTunes. That would be tremendously helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the show as well if you're enjoying it. That just helps keep the show in your app and there every week. Massive thank you to the folks that make this show possible, you the listener, and also our audio engineer, Daryl Misson, and our program PA, Susan Wilkin. Big thank you, guys, for making this possible every week. Listeners, coming up next week in the Physical Performance Show, I catch up with Chris McCormack, Macca as he's affectionately known, an Australian triathlon legend. Macca was a two-time winner of the grueling Hawaii Ironman Triathlon World Championships, winning the race in 2007 and 2010. Macca was also the 1997 Triathlon World Champion, winning that race in fine style in Perth, and also the 1997 ITU International Triathlon Union World Cup Series winner. Macca and I recently sat down at his home in Cronulla and we unpacked his extensive triathlon portfolio, as well as previewing the exciting Super League Triathlon Series set to hit the shores of Australia on Hamilton Island in just a matter of a week. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Macca is a character. He's full of passion, full of life and zest. So tune in next week. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.